Okay, I'm going to do something that I haven't really done before. We did a post up on LinkedIn where I was making the case that Agile is about alignment. That if we don't get the structure of the organization, the teaming strategies right, if we don't get the governance right, basically how we're going to feed work into those teams, and if we don't get our measures and controls right, there's really almost like nothing that you're going to do in Agile from a practices or culture perspective that is going to work. Stand by that comment. Got like something like 75 or 80 comments last time I asked or I looked, and most of the comments were like pretty snarky, like things like, how do you say I don't know Agile without saying I don't know Agile? Questions like, I believe this guy's absolutely wrong, doesn't know what he's talking about, right? That kind of stuff. Well, it's like I've been doing this for a minute, right? So I've had leading Agile for about 13 years. I've been in the Agile community for about 20 years. Not before that, but including that, right? And so here's kind of the deal, right? I have a difference of opinion about what Agile is with a lot of Agile coaches out there. So if your belief about Agile is that Agile is about radical empowerment of the teams, if it's about just empowering people and letting them decide, letting the people closest to the work make all the decisions, right? If Agile is a social movement to you, yeah, I totally disagree with that view. The kinds of companies that we're working with and that want to adopt Agile, what they want to do is they want to be able to put product into market quickly and to be able to get fast feedback on it. They want to be able to have long-term roadmaps where they can communicate to their customers what it is that they're going to do, but also want to realize that they want to inspect and adapt and be able to respond to change. Sometimes companies want to operate with greater agility, but they also recognize that they're working in really, really complex systems where lots of teams have to come together over long periods of time to produce systematically integrated deliverables. And what you find, right, in large systems is that people don't typically tend to self-organize large systems. If you look at what Agile was really about, 23 years ago or something like that, it's a small team methodology. It was really about, 6 or 8 people sitting in a room with an on-site customer, inspecting and adapting their way to the product that customer wants, or maybe like, moving from an XP world into more of a Scrum world, working with a product owner that gets to define a backlog, and then the team is collaborating with that product owner to put working tested software in front of them every couple of weeks, and letting the product owner be able to change their mind. Up underneath that ethic wasn't 6 or 8 people doing whatever the heck that they wanted to do. Those 6 to 8 people were operating within a set of constraints. By the very nature of having 6 to 8 people in a cross-functional team that are aligned toward a particular product or a particular set of goals, that is the structure of a small team. The governance of a small Scrum team is the product owner creating a prioritized backlog. If, in a small Scrum team, the ability to put together a working tested increment of software with no defects, hopefully with some sort of stable velocity, is basically a way of measuring progress. So a small Agile team has a structure, it has a governance model, it has a metrics. And that's where Scrum fails. If you don't create those conditions for a Scrum team, your Scrum team is going to be thrashing around. So if that's okay with you, right? I just want to put these people in a room and just let them do whatever they want and they'll do the best thing possible. You just live in a different world than I live in, right? If that's your ethic. So even at a small team level, to do any kind of structured, disciplined, getting things out in front of customers on regular intervals, the ability to deploy without defects, that requires some alignment at that team level. But here's the problem. When you start getting into things at scale, you're dealing with technology architectures that are incredibly complex. You're dealing with organizational design models that do not lend themselves to complete cross-functional teams working on top of products or feature sets or domains or business capabilities, right? You just don't have that. The way that the system is governed is typically top-down, command and control, audit, compliance, really heavy duty, long-term planning type governance models. And the things that we measure and control are often the production of artifacts and not the production of working tested software. We prioritize for transient objects rather than the objects that we're putting into the hands of a customer. So when I say something like, you have to get the system right, you have to get the structure right, you have to get the governance right, you have to get the metrics right before you can enable it with practices, before the culture can emerge, what I'm basically saying is that we have to put people into the right containers and give them the right inputs and enable them to produce the right outputs before you're going to be able to get them to behave in a collaborative, adaptive way. You put a bunch of people in this complex kind of jacked up ecosystem, and you basically say we're going to do a grassroots up transformation, or we're going to just let that team do whatever they can within the existing ecosystem. The challenge that you have is that it's almost cliche in the Agile community that the antibodies start working against it. Well, the reason why the antibodies start working against it is because it's incongruent with how the system operates. It is a sub-optimization within the larger enterprise. And absolutely, right? And so when I have something that's creating a sub-optimization within the larger enterprise, the enterprise doesn't recognize that as a good thing. It shuts it down because it creates chaos, and organizations are built for order. So what you have to do is you have to recognize that in order to get lots of teams working in concert, what you have to do is you have to approach those leaders and you have to give them a different way forward. And so a lot of times what's experienced is culture problems or resistance or not wanting to delegate or command and control, whatever thing we're going to use, is really just cognitive dissonance. So many of these leaders have not been presented with a credible alternative for how to bring products to market that they can get their head around, right? They understand the governance, they understand the financial controls, they understand their customer expectations and how they've been making and meeting commitments in the market. They understand the complexities of their technology stack. And when you as an Agile coach sit there and go, we have to get the culture here right because you guys are too command and control, or you're not willing to delegate or empower your teams, and you go through this cultural indoctrination with them, like you might get some people to buy on it, but in these complex environments, I've never, ever seen that work at scale. I've never, ever seen that systematically introduce Agile into a large organization. It might work for a while, but it will inevitably come crashing down. So what we have to do is we have to get organizations into a place where they can see a better way of being able to do the things that they need to do within their existing ecosystems, right? So typically that starts with, let's put together a model for a teaming strategy. Let's understand where those dependencies are. Let's get a lean Agile governance framework where I can take big things and break them into small things, and small things and break them into even smaller things, so that I can focus on MVP, doing the smallest thing possible, getting the work fed to persistent teams, understanding where there are dependencies and orchestrating those dependencies. Over time, sure, I want to break those dependencies, but dependencies do not get self-organized out of a system. They have to be intentionally broken. I mean, think about like the dependencies in auto manufacturing, defense contracting, large-scale software systems. Those are the kinds of dependencies that I'm talking about. So again, the way that I define Agile is the ability to get the organization to put work or product into market in smaller batches so that it can get feedback, and when it learns something new, be able to change its mind. I have found the best way to do that with large organizations and at scale is to take a structured and systematic approach to organizational change. Right? In our world, basically, we look at business capability models, domain models, product model hierarchies, org charts, right? We look at that across the board, and we create an initial hypothesis for what that teaming strategy might look like. You can understand where the dependencies are between those teams, either human capital, like people dependencies, technological dependencies, process dependencies, requirements dependencies, product dependencies, all kinds of different dependencies, financial controls dependencies, right? Those things things have to be dealt with, right? And so until you can deal with them, they have to be orchestrated and they have to be managed, right? So if I can get a governance model that's breaking big things into small things and feeding them into persistent teams, orchestrating dependencies while I start to break those dependencies over time, you can actually move into a transformation framework that enables you to create the kinds of culture and the kinds of ecosystems that you want. But you are not going to get there ever by sitting there telling people that, they just need to delegate in their teams. It is a recipe for disaster, and we come in and clean up behind a whole lot of that kind of stuff because it does not work at scale. So what I would challenge anybody who thinks this is a culture first problem, I will acknowledge you need a leader that gets on board, but what you have to get them on board with is this idea that there is a better way of delivering incrementally and iteratively in the market. There is a lot of advantage of working closer with customers and deploying things more frequently and getting feedback and learning as we go, right? That is a systems problem. That's a systems problem. That is a teaming strategy problem. It's a governance problem. It's a metrics problem. And if what you say is culture first, is I have to get that leader to change, you don't get them to change by getting them to adopt the culture. You get them to change by alleviating the cognitive dissonance, giving them a better way that's going to put them into a better set of conditions to be able to address their markets. Right? Not this empower the teams and the teams are going to figure it out stuff. So if that's what we're saying, if that's what as a community we are saying Agile is about, is just empowering people and getting them to self-organize all this stuff away, I have yet to see that work at any level of scale, and we are not talking about the same thing. But if you are talking about helping folks put product into market more quickly, more effectively, at scale, in complex environments with real company concerns, audit compliance, governance, control, having to be accountable to shareholders, having to be financially responsible for the dollars that you spend, having to deliver things on time, right? There is a way to do Agile and to behave with agility given those constraints. And here's the cool thing, right? When you meet an organization where it is and you address its concerns and you give it the ability to operate with greater optionality, if not pure play agility, right? You give it the ability to deliver in a more agile way, and it starts to trust these agile practices. Then what you do is you get the organization to start to delegate and to start to empower and all the things that you want, right? But when you ask for that first, what starts to happen is it doesn't work and it erodes your credibility, right? And it doesn't solve the problem. And I personally believe that a lot of this conversation is really marginalizing Agile. What we see in market right now is that most of the time you can't even talk about Agile with executives. There's a few you can, but most times you cannot talk about Agile. They see that as a team-based methodology. They see Agile as a way of teams doing storyboards and charts and things like that. The vast majority of leaders we speak to do not see Agile as a credible way of running their business. They're adopting different words: digital transformation, composable enterprises, product-driven organizations. Sometimes we hear projects to products. There's a lot of different words, but Agile is getting pushed further and further down the stack because of our insistence of team-based practices, and culture is a way to solve this problem, and is not going to solve the problem at any kind of scale. So that's my answer. So I'm gonna probably try to hit a few of the comments, maybe clean up some stuff from what I did yesterday, but this is my point of view, and I stand behind the comment that my team put together. If we don't get these alignment issues taken care of first, structure, governance, metrics, right? You've got no shot at practices working at scale. You got no shot at changing culture at scale. So it is about alignment first. And then once we get all the things into alignment, then we can start dealing with some of the other downstream stuff that is near and dear to a lot of our hearts. So I hope this helps clear it up, at least my position. Don't expect anybody to agree with me. But I'm telling you, when you look at it this way, you can make a lot of progress in these organizations and you can really make a difference. So I wish you guys the best of luck, and I appreciate all the comments, even though I don't think any of them actually agreed with me. Talk to you guys later. Bye.